Okay, good morning and welcome to this webinar and digital launch of the Mnemonic Security Report 2021. In this year's report, you can read about our predictions for 2021 and some of our observations from our 24/7 Security Operations Center. The report includes articles written by our team of security experts about a broad set of current security challenges and topics like security predictions for 2021, lessons learned from COVID-19, reducing the risk of insider threats, building an enterprise security architecture, unsanctioned remote and third-party access, new paradigms for security threats in modern cloud applications, third-party dependencies in development. New of this year is that we will run a webinar series that will cover all of the topics and articles found in the report. In today's webinar, we will cover our observations and lessons learned from the last year and give you our predictions for 2021. The next webinar in the series will be about insider threats and will be on Tuesday, March 9th. Everyone on our event list will receive invitations for the upcoming webinars, and we will also post more information on our social media and mnemonic.no/webinars. So stay tuned. And now over to today's presenter. Dr. Marie Mo is a research scientist working with threat intelligence and incident response at Mnemonic. She has experience as a team leader at Norsat, and she led their incident handling of cyber attacks against Norway's critical infrastructure. Marie has a PhD in information security and is also an associated professor at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, where she teaches the course Incident Response, Ethical Hacking, and Forensics. And before I give the word to Marie, just a practical information. If you're entering from a browser, you can submit questions throughout the presentation by selecting the Q&A icon from the bottom menu as shown on the left side. If you are in the application, a Q&A panel will appear on the right side, and you can enter your questions to all panelists. And Marie will answer all questions at the end of the presentation. Okay, that's it from me. Let's start. I will now hand over the presentation to you, Marie.
Thank you very much. You just have to stop sharing so I can share my presentation.
Yeah.
Right. Let's see if this works. Are you seeing my full screen presentation now?
Yes.
Great, so let's get started. So thank you for the introduction. My name is Marie Mo, and I work with the Mnemonic Threat Intelligence team. I'm with the UK office, so I'm presenting this lovely morning from my office in London. So today I have the honor of launching this webinar series where we present highlights from our annual security report. And I'll start out with the threat intelligence perspective. First, how the threat landscape looked like from our point of view in 2020, some statistics from our SOC team, and then looking into the future, trying to give you some predictions about what we think the cyber threat landscape will look like for this year. And as Alexandra explained, you can use the Q&A box feature if you have questions during my talk. And I promise to set aside some time at the end so that I can answer any of your questions. So we cannot talk about 2020 and the threat landscape without mentioning COVID-19 and looking into how COVID-19 affected the overall cyber threat landscape. Because as all of us have experienced, this has affected both our personal and work lives. And from a security perspective, also it has had some interesting effects. It also lets us study how both people and threat actors behave when there's a time of disruption. So as the lockdown started in the spring of 2020, most of us found ourselves working from our home office. And this seems to be a situation that will also last for a foreseeable future. We might go back to the office again, but maybe there will be a situation where we are working more from home than we used to be also before the COVID-19. So it changes things in the threat landscape. It changes how we are exposed, and also there are changes to the visibility, how we as network defenders are able to look into the network traffic and detect threats and cyber attacks. Of course, we saw also that COVID-19 became a very popular theme for different phishing campaigns. It's always the case that when something is a hot topic, when something is likely to generate clicks, the threat actors will, of course, utilize this. We also saw a lot of misinformation campaigns related to COVID-19. I won't go into details on all of these, but I'm sure you all have noticed that whenever you surf social media, there's a lot of confusing information, and yeah, it's easy to be led down into the rabbit hole on that. What's also very worrying is that we saw targeted attacks against healthcare, against the people working hard overtime to protect us, to save us in this stressful time. And of course, on top of having the pandemic to deal with, you also have to deal with cyber attacks and outages due to it. We saw that vaccine development was targeted, and also the vaccine rollout when the vaccine finally became available. But it's not all doom and gloom. There are some positive things here as well. So, as you know, we as people, we come together in times of crisis, and we learn, we adapt. So one thing that I want to mention is that there were some really good initiatives by defenders that were joining forces to fight the COVID-19 cyber threats, and I'll come back to that. So working from home, how did it affect the threat landscape? At the start of the lockdowns, there was a little bit, scrambling to make working from home really work out for people, and there was a increase in bring your own devices. There were some ad hoc solutions for remote connectivity, and several companies suddenly discovered they might not have enough licenses for everyone to log on remotely at the same time. And yeah, this increases the cybersecurity risk, the exposure in the form of more vulnerable devices and more attack surfaces. And also, we have seen that the working from home and the cyber threat landscape has led to speed up of the digitalization of infrastructure, and also of moving things into the cloud. And we saw that those organizations that already had taken most of the infrastructure into the cloud, they might have had an easier time with the transition. But there was, as I mentioned, scaling of services was an issue. And also the monitoring and visibility of systems became an issue for some. And we also saw that there was changes in user security posture. You might feel a little bit more relaxed when you're working from home, or you might feel a little bit more stressed if you have kids running around all the time, distracting you, disturbing you, maybe also getting access to your devices. So this is certainly something to take into account when you think about the overall impact on the threat landscape. We saw that video conferencing tools and company chatting tools became very attractive targets suddenly. There was a lot of vulnerability exposed in popular solutions, which I think was because suddenly this became a more attractive target. It also became more attractive for security researchers to take a closer look on these solutions and discover vulnerabilities. So this is, patching has been, of course, something that has been important when we see all these really highly exploited vulnerabilities. I remember at the start of 2020, we had the Citrix NetScaler vulnerability that sort of didn't really make a lot of noise when it was disclosed, I think, in end of December 2019. And then at the start of 2020, we saw a big increase in scanning for, and also we saw exploits of it and organizations getting compromised. And then, of course, over the year, there were more and more examples of this. And as I will come back to in our SOC statistics, we have seen a big increase in reconnaissance activity, scanning for vulnerability in exposed devices. So patch and configuration management has become crucial. And for some companies, they discovered that some of our customers saw that they might have some problems with their configuration and patch management when the devices are now most of the time residing outside of the company internal network. So this is also something that we had to look into at the start of the pandemic. But now these things seems to have, really increased the digitalization, and also seems like most of our customers have now found working solutions for work from home. And one thing that's been a big increase this last year is that we've seen remote logins being under high volume of attacks. There's suddenly a massive and sudden increase in external traffic towards internal resources, which is not external, it's actually employees logging in from remote. But this also means that it's easier for an attacker to blend into the log-on noise, so to say. So in short, this became more challenging to discover abnormal traffic, since everything now looked a bit different than usual. So we see that remote login to email accounts, company chat, video conferencing tools, VPN solutions, and other remote access solutions, they quickly became very desirable targets for attackers. And what you need is to have strong password policies. You need multi-factor authentication, secure configuration of your multi-factor authentication, and patching of all the internet exposed service running services such as VPN, remote desktop protocol, and SSH that become really crucial. We saw a sharp increase in scanning for these exposed services. And you should be extra aware that you might have some legacy systems that allow for multi-factor authentication bypass, which we've seen in some cases. And this has then also been coupled with the increase in so-called password spraying and credential stuffing attacks, which I'll come back to, where attackers systematically attempt to break into the systems using previously leaked passwords or just using common passwords. And this has been a real plague of 2020. And we saw, as I mentioned, in addition to this password guessing activity, all these vulnerabilities in popular network perimeter solutions such as the Citrix NetScaler, F5 Big IP, Pulse Secure VPN, Fortinet VPN. There's a long list of these solutions which had really critical vulnerabilities that, of course, attackers latched onto and started scanning for and started exploiting. So also when it comes to SSH, it's really important that, sometimes you see that the SSH connections are open temporarily to allow for quick access, and then maybe the configuration management isn't great and you forget to close those afterwards. That has also been one popular way of getting into systems, like intrusion vectors. As mentioned, there was a lot of phishing with the COVID-19 themes. And I mean, this is always the case. The cybercrime actors, they capitalize on the sense of urgency and fear. And I remember at the start of the pandemic, there were actually some cybercrime actors that that made statements about no, we're not gonna target or use COVID-19 as a lure. We're not going to target healthcare systems, but this really quickly turned out to not be the case. It became a really popular theme for a lot of phishing campaigns. We did not see an increase in phishing campaigns. We just saw, the same old phishing campaigns that we already had signatures for detection for, that we were already following in our threat intelligence. They just changed their lures and put in COVID-19 related things. And this seemed very effective, especially when you disguise this, like in this example, as a company internal. Someone's caught COVID-19. Of course, you want to click on that and figure out if this can affect you personally. And also official government communication around COVID-19 has been popular. So yeah, the same old phishing, same old business email compromise / CEO fraud, the same old ransomware, but ransomware has become a real nuisance. It's become, the ransomware actors have really upped their game and shown that they evolved during 2020. I'll come back to that. So they're using existing infrastructure, they're repurposing the malware, and they include the pandemic lures. And yeah, sadly, the healthcare sector was not spared. It actually became under tremendous pressure. To add to this, some cybercriminals even decide that hospitals and the medical supply chain companies were perfect targets for ransomware attacks. Maybe because of increased willingness to pay a ransom due to importance of keeping the critical systems up all the time. And also in 2020, we sadly saw the first reported death due to a patient dying due to ransomware. There was an incident that shut down critical system at a German hospital, and this leading to a patient in need of urgent care being redirected to a different hospital and not getting there in time. So over to the espionage actors, the targeted attacks. So the APT actors, they of course carries out their campaigns as usual, but now they have, as we see in the cybercrime actors, exchanged some of their lures with COVID-19 themed lures, and using them in their usual targeted attack campaigns. But there are some groups that seem to have been explicitly tasked to carry out espionage campaigns targeted COVID-19 crisis response. And of course, the race for a cure and a vaccine, it created an obvious intelligence gathering need. So someone tasked them with this, saying that you should go out there and find how other countries other nation states are dealing with the pandemic crisis. Hospital, medical supply chain become more critical than ever, and also APTs targeted these. And the NCSC in UK and the US CISA, they revealed a big threat, a Russian threat actor campaign by APT29 that was targeting particularly healthcare and research and healthcare, looking into developing vaccines. And as I mentioned, this password spraying activity is not only the cybercrime actors that did this, it's also a very effective way of getting into system for the APTs. So attackers are just using commonly used passwords against many accounts. And this is the way of getting into, because there's always someone that is not, if you have a few users that have bad passwords, this is the way for the threat actors to get into your systems. If you also combine this with credential stuffing, where you're using previously leaked passwords, I mean, there's so many big breaches, like this example from Have I Been Owned. There's so many username password combinations leaked out there that you can try. And I mean, you can do this automatically, and it's very effective. And so CISA and NSA also warned about the ABT groups targeting healthcare entities with password spraying. And in Norway, the NCSC warned of the successful password brute forcing attacks of parliament members. I'm sure many of you remember this, of their email accounts. So this has been something that we've seen a lot of in 2020, and I don't expect this to stop because it's an easy way of getting into systems. I mean, you just have to be really careful with how you implement your multi-factor authentication. Make sure that there's no way for attackers to utilize some legacy systems that allow for bypass of the multi-factor authentication. And of course, keep all of your exposed devices to the internet patched as good as is possible. As I mentioned, we have seen there's some lights in this darkness. Defenders are joining forces, which is a very good thing. So there's been two initiatives formed in 2020. It's the CTI League, and it's also the COVID-19 Cyber Threat Coalition. These are groups, Slack groups that you can, I think one of them is open for everyone that volunteers. The other one needs some vetting and you can apply to become a member. And they're dedicated to fight COVID-19 cyber threats. It's using these as information sharing hubs. They're doing takedowns, triage, law enforcement, escalations. And mnemonic is active in lots of different intelligence gathering and information sharing activities when it comes to joining forces with other defenders. So we also, of course, utilize whatever threat intelligence we get from our collaborations, and we add all malicious domains that we find or that others find to our block lists. We use the indicators of compromise for threat hunting. We have a dedicated threat hunting team that has been really busy in 2020 and is continuing to be busy with looking into, have any of our customers been targeted by the different campaigns. So I also would like to say to anyone listening into this webinar that you feel they have some spare capacity to help with the defending against COVID-19 cyber threats, to look into joining some of these initiatives. Okay, over to the mnemonic SOC statistics. So statistics have been collected from all of the incidents that we are analyzing. It's actually nearly 7 trillion security events, as over 38,000 real customer cases that have been detected in our Security Operations Center in 2020. So I'll go into some highlights from these statistics. First thing is what I already mentioned. We have seen a big increase, a spike in reconnaissance activity, 83%. Like it's almost 5 times more than in 2018. So I mean, this can be considered like the internet background noise, but it's certainly been more noisy this past year. And I think this is something that is connected to all these vulnerabilities that have been exposed, that have been scanned for, because we typically see that whenever there is a new vulnerability, the scanning really picks up. And then we saw, for instance, vulnerabilities in NetLogon, SMB Ghost, also mentioned the SolarWinds compromise, which came at the end of 2020. And also the pandemic as a whole, and other vulnerability disclosures. And this really gave some noticeable spikes in the reconnaissance activity. And we also saw active exploit attempts against those vulnerabilities. They often occur the first 2 weeks after an exploit is made public, and then it gradually reduces over time as systems get patched. And there's new vulnerabilities that gets the attention. But yeah, this is part of the collective scanning, probing noise that plagues the internet. And I mean, we all see it all the time, but it seems to have really picked up the last year in our sensors. So another thing that we have statistics of is when security incidents are happening. And as you can see on this this illustration, it is mainly during the workday, and it happens, of course, at all hours of the day. You might have the impression that it always happens on a Friday afternoon when you're about to leave the office. But looking at the statistics, it can happen at all hours of the day. But typically, there's a spike when people log into the systems, their account in the morning. There's usually a dip in the lunch break, and then there's a spike again after the lunch break, and then there's a dip again as people stop working. So yeah, it's because when users are working, they are likely to click on things, opening attachments, visiting suspicious websites, and I mean, just pay. And sometimes the spikes is because they're maybe not paying so much attention, like when you're trying quickly to clear your inbox first thing in the morning. So that's the distribution of incidents that we are observing. And what days are security incidents happening? Nothing surprising here. It's mainly during the work days of the week, and typically more on Monday, Tuesday, and then less on Friday, I guess because of public holidays and users taking half Friday or the whole Friday off. But we actually saw some interesting things in the stats when it comes to working from home activity. So the impact that I described of people logging on in the morning, then logging off during lunch, and then starting again after lunch, that is more noticeable in this graph that is for the first 3 months of 2020, which was before the lockdowns started. So the yellow line here is the first 3 months, and then the red one is the rest of the year. So the red one is describing how incidents were distributed after people started to work from home in a larger degree. So what we can see is that the lunch dip is less apparent, which I guess is because people maybe don't take lunch at the same time, or maybe work through the lunch. Also, people start earlier in the morning, it looks like, and works later during the day. So I guess this is something that maybe some of you also recognize yourself in. When you're working from home, you check your email first earlier. You don't have to commute into the office before you start checking your email. And also there's a tendency to maybe not close your laptop at 5 p.m. I actually would recommend, or people that research into being an efficient worker recommend that you should have some kind of ritual closing, ending the workday when you're working from home, because otherwise it has a tendency to become a work you do 24/7. So moving on, one other interesting highlight from the SOC statistics that also illustrates what we've seen when it comes to the cyber threat landscape is that abusing identities has really skyrocketed to the clouds. There's a rising trend in security incidents where a user or attacker has gained unauthorized access to some resource. And most commonly, this is through abuse of user credentials, like password guessing activity, or getting hold of leaked passwords, as I already mentioned. This trend has been growing steadily, I guess, from 2017 to 2019. So just to explain this graph, the first one is from 2017, the second is from 2018, and the third is 2019, including 3 first months of 2020. So it's pre-pandemic and then post-pandemic. So you can see the red spike is post-pandemic. So we've seen a huge increase after the lockdowns started, and working from home started, which I guess was because of remote tools being implemented and used, which attackers took notice of and started to abuse in a larger degree. So we saw that actually post-pandemic, 61% of all security incidents were involving some type of account abuse. So this has been a noticeable change in the threat landscape. Okay, so let's look at the future. What are our security predictions for this year? So 2021 predictions. One thing that I want to mention is we see a big professionalization of cyber criminals, especially when it comes to ransomware. Ransomware has become increasingly problematic. We have observed how criminals have streamlined and adapted their operations to become even more effective in their money-making schemes. And some are even extorting their victims more than once by also exfiltrating data and threatening to leak the sensitive company data if the victim does not pay the ransom. So we've seen the ransomware threat actors really upping their game, evolving their techniques, procedures. And I'm convinced that this is something we have to really fight hard in 2021 too. We see that breach as a service has become a really popular offering on the dark web. It has been there for some time. It's not something new, but it's something we predict will become even more of an issue. So to maximize the revenue, so attackers will advertise their breach as a service on the dark web, and then other attackers can purchase this. And also we see that attackers are selling off access or data they no longer need to give other attackers a foothold in organizations. So actually taking over their foothold. And this, of course, increases the complexity also for us as defenders. So the use of these so-called initial access brokers has become increasingly popular. They do the groundwork in a way by phishing, scanning for vulnerabilities, harvesting credentials, installing malware, gaining the foothold, and then later on they sell their access to the victim to ransomware as a service operators. And yeah, there are several malware infections that we have seen has been precursors of ransomware. And operators of malware botnets like the Emotet and TrickBot seem to have partnered with ransomware gangs, such as operators behind the Ryuk ransomware. And it's not only cyber criminals that operate in this manner, it's also cases where we have observed cases where APTs, after completing their own objectives on a compromised target, have sold their access and foothold to the highest bidder. So likewise, there are other absurd cases where after a compromise, the APT did not complete any of the objectives themselves. They just immediately transferred their access to another team, another APT team probably. But also, we can speculate that this implies some sort of business-oriented focus, where the value of the compromised victim is worth more for sale than the chance of the APT attempting to complete their own objectives and potentially be discovered. So they might decide that, no, this is too risky, we'd rather sell off this and let some other crime actors take over the foothold. So yeah, ransomware actors are evolving their TTPs. So for instance, after infection and even before infection, some cyber criminals are directly emailing their victims to extort them. And in some cases, we've even seen them calling them on the phone. And depending on the corporation, the individual being targeted, I mean, there are lots of different unpleasant methods that they can use to threaten and to add some extra pressure to get the extortion scheme working. And we actually seen also extortion × 2, where ransomware actors, they both first get hold of sensitive data, they exfiltrate the data, and then they launch a ransomware attack. So the victim has to pay or is threatened to pay to get their data in hostage released, but I also are threatened that we will leak this sensitive data if you do not pay. So it's like a multiplier of the extortion. So yeah, another thing you should look out for is unauthorized installation of tools like Cobalt Strike, which is one of the favorite tools used by criminals for controlling multiple infected endpoints within a network before they launch their ransomware attack. So early detection and removal of these initial access intrusions, together with a sound and tested backup strategy, beware that the ransomware actors are also actively looking for backups and also encrypting the backups. So you really need to have an offline solution for backups. Something that's not connected is a totally separated and segregated network from where your data is. So together with that tested backup plan, that seems to be the best way to be prepared for handling this incidents and not paying the ransom. So yeah, that was the end of, or no, that wasn't that. There was one more security prediction. Of course, as I mentioned, there's the, we think there will be an increase in attacks against home office devices. It doesn't look like working from home is something that will stop doing in the foreseeable future. So this things like home routers, IoT devices, family members' devices, it has really expanded the available attack surface. And of course, the attackers know this. So the consequence of this is that, we predict that there will be a rise in attacks utilizing different types of home equipment as an intrusion vector to gain access to networks and resources. And another thing to look out for is misconfigurations. I mean, it's something that's really one of the most exploited vectors out in the wild. It does not require a significant amount of skill to exploit. And misconfigurations can be very hard for the IT teams or the security teams to discover. So yeah, while vulnerabilities are fault of flaw in the piece of software itself, I mean, you can check if you have outdated versions of things, if you have vulnerable version of software running. Misconfigurations is a bit harder to scan for. So this is really something to be aware of. And I mean, one example is last November, defense ministers in the European Union were having a top secret web meeting, and it was crashed by Dutch journalists. So indicating that something was wrong with the setup, the configuration of their video conferencing tool. And I mean, there are less serious cases too, like maybe problems with switching off the cat filter. So these are certainly something to be aware of. It can be really embarrassing, but also, I mean, it can be something that leads to an international political crisis. So I'm ending my predictions by this and opening up for the Q&A. So I'm going to check now to see if anyone put in any questions in the box. Let me have a look. No questions so far. You have, if anyone is like burning with some questions, just put it in the box now. If not, I'll just want to refer you to the link to download the full security report and also all these different social media links. And also, someone told me that this podcast, or not this podcast, but this webinar is going to be up on YouTube later on. If you want to refer some of your colleagues to watch it. We also have a lot of more webinars upcoming. Alexandra told you about the next one on insider threats, which will be in this webinar series. Actually, Tuesday next week, I'm giving another webinar which will focus on lessons learned from the SolarWinds incident. So if you're interested in that, you can sign up for it on our website. So yeah. Oh, there is actually one question. The question is, with so many companies undergoing cloud transformation, has there been a significant increase in attacks against cloud service providers? So yeah, we have seen a big increase in AD credentials, login credentials this year, and lots of those are in cloud service providers. So you really need to think about how equipped are you to find logs of what's been going on if you have had an intrusion through a cloud service. This is something you should think about upfront when you're designing your solution, so that you have forensics readiness in case this happens to you. And of course, also detection tools that will also monitor whatever, suspicious logins through the cloud services. So yeah, this is definitely something we've seen an increase in. Let's see, there's more. I have to expand this box a bit. Are you seeing an increase in dependency confusion attacks? Yeah, that's a kind of new one. So that I will have to go to the SOC and get an answer on that, because I would think that we've seen more scannings or more activity on this since the blog post and the vulnerability was disclosed recently. And it's not a new thing, but something that now everyone is thinking about is dependency confusion. So I would think so, but I will have to confer with the SOC, so I can't really answer that question right now. But if you're interested in more details around that, and you're a mnemonic customer, you can send us that question through the customer portal, and I'll redirect it to the correct person. Third question. Just out of curiosity, if time permits, could you say a bit more about COVID-19 misinformation campaigns? So yeah, I didn't cover that, but we have, of course, we have observed that there are misinformation campaigns. Like for instance, here in the UK, there's been a lot of spreading of the misinformation that 5G towers causes COVID, and this has actually even led to sabotage of mobile base stations. So it's really something to take serious. It has physical consequences. And we've seen this particularly on social media, as I mentioned, like in Facebook, in WhatsApp messages, and like Twitter. If you just do some open source intelligence scans for the words relevant search term, we will see a lot of this. And it also seems like this is something that nation states might be interested in doing, just for creating general confusion and mistrust to the government, as we also seen in election misinformation campaigns. So this is certainly a trend that we have noticed, and that I don't think will stop anytime soon. Okay, I think that was all the questions. If there's nothing else, thank you all for tuning in and listening to this webinar, and hopefully we'll be able to see each other physically sometime in the future. At least I hope so. Have a good day.